Welcome to Building Healthy Relationships, the 4 Habits podcast, helping you enjoy better harmony at home, thrive at work, and win at life. Here are your hosts, Dr. Andrea and Jon Taylor-Cummings, recognized authorities on the subjects of improving work relationships and cultures, as well as couple and home relationships.
Well, hello and welcome to this series in our podcast. We are so looking forward to the conversation today. We have Tammy Alvarez with us. Welcome, Tammy.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes. And, to all our guests, whatever time you're listening in, it's good morning, good afternoon, good evening. But you know the usual route. Before we jump into the conversation, we want to do a proper introduction for Tammy. So, Jon, do you want to share the bio?
Always love to do that. So, Tammy Alvarez is a leadership powerhouse and the founder of Career Winners Circle, a global coaching platform empowering professionals to elevate their careers and rediscover their passion for work. With decades of C-suite experience on Wall Street, Tammy has partnered with industry-leading firms to drive organizational transformation and leadership experience. Her spirited break all the rules approach
love that.
combines strategic insight with pragmatic coaching, making her a trusted advisor for executives navigating high-stakes environments. Known for her dynamic storytelling and actionable strategies, Tammy inspires leaders to embrace courage, authenticity, and transformative results.
Wow.
And Tammy has a new book out. We'll be talking about that in a bit, but a new book out just this year. So we will be talking about that as well in a bit.
Okay.
Why don't we jump in?
And Tammy, there's so much there already, a powerhouse of a person and information behind it. But we always want to get to know the person behind the story. Take us back a bit to help set the context for why you do what you do and the passion that drives you now.
Absolutely. And we can go back a way bit or a little bit, right?
We'll leave it to you.
and so I spent the majority of my career as an executive in and around Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
And, I got there in a very untraditional way in that I did not get my college degree until I was 40.
Oh, really?
Okay.
And so long story short, I was a teenager. My parents had split up. No big deal. That was kind of how things were going at the time. But about a month or two later, my mother, my sister, and I became homeless.
Oh, wow.
And I saw how much, I was 15 years old, and I saw how much she struggled. And so I had this fear-based ambition because I did not want history to repeat itself.
Indeed, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time I graduated high school, I had no ambition, no money, and my grades were terrible, right? So I was like, I'm going to work for a little bit and see how things go. And I had the benefit of having an absolutely amazing mentor who saw more in me than I ever did.
Wow.
And saw this 18-year-old girl who had, more, moxie than skill, and just used me in that way. And so throughout my career, I always felt like I didn't fit in.
Mm-hmm.
I was usually the youngest on the leadership team. I was the only woman. And I was from a small town in New Jersey where there were more cows than people. And so I really always felt that I didn't belong.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, I think my perspective and how I learned and how I work with people and how I read the room was very different.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really what I used as my launch pad to move into those executive ranks within Wall Street. But the height of my career is managing 2,000 people in 35 countries. And I loved what I did until I didn't.
Okay.
And I remember sitting in that conference room after an earnings call, because we had missed earnings again, and it was a disaster. And we were all blaming each other for the reasons why we missed earnings. And
Yes, you do.
I do it all the time. Right? I loved that game because we'd all go out for beers afterwards and have a good laugh. But I remember just feeling like I had this out-of-body experience where I was floating over the room and just didn't care anymore.
Right.
And I developed what I didn't know was terminal at the time, but I developed a disease called I don't give a shit-itis. And
Wondered what was coming.
anymore. So within 6 months of that, I had cashed out of Wall Street. I had moved to a tropical island off the coast of Belize and started this company about 7 years ago.
Okay.
And so, through this journey, I think it really has given me the perspective on what it feels like to get things right, what it feels like to get things wrong, and the impact that, your career and your family and your home life has on your overall well-being and your ability to thrive. And so that's really
Absolutely.
what fuels all the things that we do, because we do believe that absolutely everyone deserves to love Mondays. And so if you don't wake up on Mondays with your feet hitting the ground, excited for what's ahead of you, you need to change that, and you can. And that's what we're here to do.
Oh, amazing. And I can just, the energy and the enthusiasm is just pouring out over the technology, showing us that you
And I'm only
really,
a half a cup of coffee in, right? So I
oh,
think
there
we're
you
good,
go.
right?
There you go. So what is it that you do? How have you kind of refocused and repackaged yourself after you've discovered that, no more Wall Street?
The itis.
Um, So what Career Winner Circle does is we empower business leaders to make a big impact and love every Monday again. And that comes in three different flavors.
Mhm.
It comes with, working with mid to senior level leaders who are stuck in that soul crushing grind,
Mhm.
but they're also not able to sell everything, become a barista, and live in a yurt, right? They've got spouses and kids in college and all these things.
Yeah,
And so how do I get out of this trap?
Mm.
And, the
indeed.
cover of the book actually has gold handcuffs for those who, have them. They know what they are.
Mhm,
And
mhm, mhm.
we help them pivot into doing something that they've never done before without having to take a step back, making more impact and making more money. And so, so that's a major transformational moment for a lot of people. We also work with leaders, especially new leaders that are in at the C-suite or the senior executive ranks, on
Mhm.
how do you do this, maintain your authenticity, without having to, feel like you're completely outmatched, because it's a
Yeah.
different level when you start to manage managers and you start to work at the board level and things like that. But our
Yeah.
newest initiative, which I am beyond excited about, and we're launching in January, is a program called Amplify 360.
Mhm.
When I wrote the book Escaping the Career Trap, it's written for the disenfranchised worker, right? I
Mhm.
mean, really, if you hate Mondays, you should read the book. And what I didn't expect was that companies are paying me to come and deliver this message to their teams.
So
And I was
not
like,
just leaders, but now working with the
well, I
teams.
want their teams to know this. And I'm like, you do
Mm.
realize the first two chapters talk about how messed up everything is, and that's your fault.
And
But the
talk about your organization being the cause, right?
everything is. And what they're saying is they see the core message, which is treat your career like a business. You become the CEO of your career and of you Inc. And when you do
Mhm.
that, play bigger, you show up differently, and the business benefits.
Yeah.
So what we've been able to do, and we're targeting this towards middle market companies around the globe, is there is this apathetic haze that is settled in to employees in almost every company we see, right?
Yes.
Everyone has I don't give a shititis, right?
Yeah, indeed,
And
Mhm.
so
especially post-COVID.
oh, absolutely. And
Mm.
people don't want that. They want to do something meaningful. And companies don't want employees who are just mailing it in and just going through the motions. And despite everything we're trying, employee sat, pulse surveys, projects, org changes, all that stuff, nothing's working. And so what we've done is we've created a program that actually fixes this in 3 months.
Oh,
Mhm.
And
amazing.
so we get in, it's like an adrenaline shot, and we handle the big things on the employee, the leadership, and the executive team side, and move them in a direction, but it's fast and it's high impact. And so from a CWC perspective, we're starting to broaden our perspectives and our impact that we're able to make for businesses and individuals to really bring all of this together.
That's amazing. And, when we think about the hybrid world that we live in,
Mm.
the two
Mhm.
things come together. One is the apathy, actually wanting more from work and
Yeah,
not getting it. So feeling very disengaged and needing to own your own career. Because I think in the past, nobody really owned their career and they thought managers would do it. But
Mm.
now that we're working hybrid and you're not as visible, you need to be really on it in managing, what did you call it? That you Inc.
You
yes.
Inc. Exactly. Yeah.
Everyone gets a promotion today, right? You're now the CEO of You Incorporated.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And it's funny because business leaders do this all the time for their companies. They drive strategy. They make sure they have a vision. They have a great sales team. They know their product positioning and their marketing. They've got, all these things, but we don't do it for ourselves.
yeah.
Mm.
And when you start to apply those same principles to you and show up at work differently, it's just amazing the transformation that happens for the individual and for the businesses.
Indeed. You had a
I
question.
was gonna say, let's get practical. Are there one or two of those principles that you can share with the listeners here that would make a difference?
Absolutely. I think that the first thing we need to really be clear on is our value proposition,
Mhm.
right? Every company's like, what's our ROI?
Yeah.
You know, and because when you have a strong ROI, guess what? You can raise your prices. And the same thing applies when you're an employee. And so when you really understand the skills you bring to the table and the strengths that you have, and you apply those to the company's biggest goals and the
Mhm.
things that they care the most about, all of a sudden you're in a situation where you are in high demand and you're bringing skills to market that are in short supply, which increases your impact and your income.
Indeed.
So I think the first thing you need to get clear on is where's your wheelhouse? What lights you up? What fires you up? What can you do for 12 hours a day and end the day more excited than when you started?
Mhm.
We all have those few things. We're good at a lot of things, but we have a few things that really light us up. What is that? And then how can you use that to help the company achieve their biggest goals? And whether that's an individual contributor or whether you're leading teams of 2,000, everyone can do this. So I
Indeed.
think that's the first thing you want to think about. The second thing you want to think about in terms of transitioning this mindset is who's your sales team? Because if you don't have a good sales team, you don't have a company. And so think about who is saying good things about you in the room when you're not there.
Mhm.
It has to be more than your boss. And it has to be a bunch of people, high, middle, and low, based on where you are within the organization. We call
Yeah.
that your power base. And so who do you have externally of the organization, maybe within your industry or within your area of expertise, that's also saying amazing things about you? Because none of us like to network, right? You hear go networking and everyone just wants to hide under their desk, right? It's like,
Exactly.
I
Not
just
me. Yeah.
but when you think about a CEO, the CEO does not have all the answers.
Yeah.
They have an advisory group. They have peers that they go to for feedback. They have things that they do to help elevate their game. They don't win alone,
Yeah.
but they don't also tell the company, oh, I have no idea what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I've never heard a CEO actually say that, but they
Yeah.
go out and get those answers and they have that connection and that power base. So if you make sure your value proposition is strong, and you make sure you've got a rock star sales team through your power base, those are the two things that will help you move the ball faster than anything else you can possibly do.
Absolutely. You know, that line of sight between what you're doing and why it matters to the organization, or the difference it makes to the organization, is so powerful just from a motivation standpoint, let alone advancing your career. Do you notice a difference in the genders? And you know where I'm going with this. Tell us, what do you notice?
Well, we've got 5 generations in the workplace now.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty significant. And I think from a generation perspective and from a gender perspective and from a globalization standpoint, we've got this, melting pot
Hmm.
of, different people that motivate themselves differently. But
Hmm.
there are a few things I think that unify everyone. And the first thing I talk about in terms of where you can connect the dots for everyone is personal aspiration. What gets that human being out of bed in the morning, regardless of what they do for a living,
Hmm.
right? Because when you can tap into that, that's usually where the person's strengths are. And that's where you can start to lean in and leverage those skills for the personal and for company benefit. And so I think regardless of working type and, the millennials and the Gen Zers, and we got alpha coming up next, and, we got all these things and men and women and, non-binary, it's all so confusing, but human beings are not AI yet.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you tap into an individual's aspirations and help connect the dots there, the rest smooths itself out.
Yeah, I like the way you say that. The rest smooths itself out. And it all starts with that awareness of who am I and what's my gift to the world? How can I show up and
Absolutely.
shine my light?
What do I get excited about? I
Yeah.
remember managing, it was a really large team. And so I had 10 different leaders that managed probably about 200 people, 150, 200 people each. And they did all the same 5 or 6 functions for different parts of the company around the world. And I had inherited this team and they were really talented, but they didn't care. Like I couldn't do anything to get them to actually lean in and get excited about what they were doing. And so finally I pulled an offsite together, and I just, there was no agenda, blank whiteboard. And I'm like, okay, clearly this is not something any of you are excited about. What would it take to get you energized? And what it turned out to be is like each of my leaders, did strategy, and they did data, they did customer onboarding, they did all of these different things. But yet one of my leaders loved strategy and was okay with the rest. Another one just ate data for breakfast and was okay. And the other one loved the people, and they loved the operations and all that kind of fun stuff. So without any HR involvement, no title changes, nothing, we just put them in their lane.
Wow.
And it's like, you know what? You are in charge of strategy for everyone now. And now you're in charge of data. You're in charge of this. You're in charge of that. And we moved the teams under them. I didn't have to redesign any process maps. I didn't have to re-level any people. And the team productivity skyrocketed.
Shot through the roof.
People were
Wow.
knocking on the door saying, how do we get in?
Mhm.
And all it took was just asking, what do you care about?
Indeed, yeah.
And then giving them the chance to do more of that.
Amazing. It
was
sounds
really
so
cool.
simple, but it is radical, and it is breaking all the rules, because I can just imagine HR pulling their hair out.
They would not have been happy.
Well, they
Changing.
never left me anyway, to be honest, but like, where are you going? What are you doing now? But the levels were the same, right? The responsibilities were, so we didn't need any, I wanted to make it clean and fun.
Yes. And
Right?
easy.
Kind of like
Yeah.
Amplify 360, right? Keep it to the basics, do the few things well, and be fast about it. And it was just a really good case study on what it would take, because from an operational perspective, the complexity increased significantly. Because now there are all these handoffs, there was all these, relationships that had to be managed, all of these things. So I was worried about it, but I put, my process hat aside for a second and said, okay, we're going to give this 6 months and you guys figure it out. And they did.
And they
Right?
did.
And so, yeah.
Because you know who speaks your language as well, don't you? When it's your strength and something that lights you up, you can spot the players who are in that same lane as well. But you just touched on a word that's a great segue for us. Managing the relationships and the interdependencies became more complex. What's the role? How does relationships feature in the work that you're doing, both inside the organization, and you mentioned who's on your sales team? Tell me how do you talk about relationships in this context?
Yeah, I love the fact that keeping work purely sterile is starting to go away.
Yay!
Right?
Finally. It never was sterile, but
right. Yes, exactly. And I just love the fact that we're realizing that we actually have to put humanity back into the workplace.
Yeah.
Because there is this spillover effect that we all have, that we don't live in a box. We can't say, okay, this is work. This is home, and this is family and friends, and it all comes together. And so the more we can account for our relationships at home and what's going on there, the more we can account for our relationships at work and how personally connected we feel to the people, even our frenemies, right? Because we all have those in the office too.
Frenemies, yeah.
I think the more we can connect personally to the entire ecosystem of our lives, the more fulfilled everyone becomes, and the more productive they become from business perspective. And, I personally have done this wrong, and I've done this right. Both from a business and from a personal perspective. Because as I was coming through the ranks earlier in my career, my husband was a stay-at-home dad. And I was so focused on work and so focused on not repeating history from my mom and all of these things that unfortunately, ultimately it ended up in a divorce because we had grown apart. Right? He was staying home and being a fantastic, parent. And I was out traveling the world for weeks at a time, solving some of the financial services' biggest problems. And I did not really, I always put family second, in terms of if there was a work call, I'd take that first. Instead of saying, no, it's actually my daughter's, she's in a competition right now. She was an equestrian. I'm like, this is going to have to wait. And so, but then again, I've done it right. So once I had that massive reset where I cashed out and did everything, my partner, Steve, he's always had the balance thing straight, right? He's had his own business. He's, he just is what I looked at him. I'm like, that's an interesting way to live. I've never thought about that. And so I had an example to look at and to be like, this is what, and I don't believe in life balance. I just don't think that that's actually achievable, but I do believe in life harmony.
Yeah.
In that, things flow and certain things require more attention during certain seasons.
Indeed.
And that's okay. But as long as everything is cohabitating together in a way that serves us and the people that we love, then I think that that's what we're all shooting for.
Yeah, I love that term, life harmony, because we talk about balance in different seasons. It might look like this one time and, going off to the different extremes, but across the piece, you get a sense of balance where all the things, people and things that are important to you get space, time, and attention.
Well,
Absolutely.
now that I've had my drinks, I'm gonna risk talking for a moment and hope I don't go into a coughing fit. As the listeners might have picked up, my voice isn't what it normally is, but
Yeah.
we'll go for it anyway. How do you advise your people who are now your CEOs who are trying to become CEO of, what did you call it? You Incorporated.
Yeah.
What advice do you give them when they're trying to take their career in the direction they want to go? They've now figured out what they want to do. What advice do you give them around that domestic relationship that we've just started talking about, that Andrea raised and you've mentioned there?
The home support
The home
network.
support network.
Mhm.
What part do you see that playing in them achieving what they're trying to achieve here?
Yeah, I mean, it's critical, right? Without that support, that I had, I could not have done that. Like, I, as a woman, especially, I never had to say, let me check before somebody asked me to go to Asia for 3 weeks,
Mhm.
because I know my husband had a cover,
Yeah.
and not all women, most women don't have that luxury. But here's what I advise my clients on: that perspective is the first step.
Mhm.
And we get so caught up into this self-induced drama of work, and it's not necessary. 99.9% of my clients are not saving lives, nor are they curing cancer.
Mhm, mhm.
And
Yeah.
so that urgent meeting that's at 7 o'clock on a Sunday night, on a Sunday night, like, is it really urgent? Like,
Yeah.
couldn't that wait till Monday?
Indeed.
And,
Yeah.
because when they start to say no and set those boundaries, or not say no, but say yes, and we're going to do this during business hours,
Yeah.
we feel like it makes us look bad. We feel like it makes us look disloyal, or that
Mhm.
we're not trying hard enough, or we're going to get passed up for that next promotion.
Hmm.
But the reality is, when you look at the executives, they're not doing this, right?
They've
You look
learned.
like
Yeah.
they're not on, email 24/7. They are not responding to Slack messages in 2.5 seconds. They are not doing any of these things. So when you start to get a heavy dose of perspective into what's truly urgent and what isn't,
Hmm.
and then you set those boundaries, now you can be present for both of your key activities.
Yeah.
You can be fully present when you're at work because this is my time. And then you
Mhm.
can be fully present at home, which helps build those relationships. Because what most of us do and try to do both at the same time, all the time, and then feel guilty that we're not doing the right things.
Either.
Like, we feel guilty we're not working. We feel guilty we're not at home. Like, this is not a winning proposition.
Yeah.
So when you've got that heavy dose of perspective, learn the word no. It's my favorite word in the English language.
Mhm,
And,
mhm.
able to move people into a way that works for you, then you can be that support for your family so they can be that support for you.
And we're so on the same page. We like to say no one can respect the boundaries you don't set. And too many of us just don't set the boundaries or don't have the courage to say, this is important to me, so I'm going to ring fence that time. And I love the way you said it. Yes, I can do it. And we're going to look at doing it on this day at that time.
Yes.
Not today. But it has to start by you setting your own boundaries or deciding what's important and then putting boundaries around them. You're
I
going to say.
want to pick up on that world of living in a world of actually, because I guess the accusation against a lot of successful people who have a supportive spouse, who's like you said in your earlier relationship, you have somebody who can pick up the slack for you. The accusation is, actually, without that, you wouldn't be able to have the success that you could have. So I want to go into this world of where we're trying to now. You've got two people who are both very career focused, both CEOs of You Inc. Each of them. How do they make it work? How do they? What would be your advice to them? How do they make it work so that even if they haven't got that person they're supporting or fully able to support, what tips there?
So my favorite story and my favorite tip is work smart, not hard.
Mhm.
Right. So for those that don't have the luxury of, the support that they need and still want to achieve that, I've got a great story with one of my clients, Deirdre, who came to me. She was working at a company for a long time, I think 10 years, and she was in this one department. And there was an opportunity for a promotion. So she posted for it.
Mhm.
And everyone thought she was a shoo-in. Even she's like, yeah, this is totally mine. I own this place. And everyone loved her. She was great. She didn't get it,
Mm.
which is why she came to me.
Okay.
And she chalked it up to the fact that, I'm not, in the boys club. I've got, a family I'm trying to support. She thought about all those things. And I'm like, okay, that might be true, but let's dig in a little bit further. And so what we did is we made a list of everything she was doing and everything that the person who got the promotion was doing.
Hmm.
And it was true. She was actually doing twice as much work.
Okay.
Okay. Then we actually said, I'm like, all right, give me the company's top priorities. So we listed them. And then we earmarked how many of the things was she doing that were aligned to the top priorities and how many was he doing that were aligned to the top priorities.
Hmm.
Everything he was doing, which was half the work, was aligned to something the company cared about.
Mm-hmm.
About 20% of what she was doing was aligned to what the company cared about. She was stuck in doing what I call the doormat projects.
Indeed, yeah.
Right? You're doing the things that aren't important, but they need to be done because no one else wants to do them.
Yeah.
She was stuck in the low value business.
Mm-hmm.
And so if she had, and we started, so then she had a conversation with her boss and she's like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Is like, oh, good point. And now she learned how to say no, set those boundaries, and only do the things that matter to the company. Because you can do less with high impact and a strong power base and achieve better results.
More, indeed.
Right.
Yeah.
But we tend to think that, the more we do, the faster we're running on the hamster wheel, then the better it's going to be for us. And it's actually the opposite.
And I love, again, that line of sight between what you're doing and the difference it makes, whether the company cares about it or not. What about imposter syndrome while we're talking about?
That's a good one.
How do you help that voice in the head, especially when you've been passed over for the promotion you thought was definitely yours and so on? How do you help people, or what's the advice that you would give? Because so many people I know would be battling imposter syndrome every day.
Yeah. And, and I don't think we live with imposter syndrome every day. Our inner voice will typically not walk around and telling us we're pretty all day, right? That is not what goes on in our head.
Okay.
And so, I call like our negative inner voice the fearsome four.
Mm-hmm.
And because we treat it all the same, but it's not, right? We've got moments of low self-confidence.
Mm-hmm.
We have our inner critic, we have negative talk, and we have second guessing. And they all show up at different times. And the reality is, if you don't feel these sometimes, you're not trying hard enough. Because as soon as you make a big play, your confidence goes to the Bahamas for a weekend. It's like, yeah, peace out, right? We're done. When you need it the most, it's not there for you. And so, for all of these things, there's three things actually that I recommend people do. The first thing, and I know it's going to sound ridiculous, but you have to write everything down that's going on in your head word for word.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell my clients to do this for a week. Keep writing the things down. Even if it's the same thing, keep writing them down. At the end of the week, condense, and then stand in front of a mirror and read them to yourself. Because you feel like you feel ridiculous half the time, right? And then once you do that, you can quickly get rid of the things that are just noise.
Not true. Yeah.
But then you're left with some legit things. And then we break those two things down into either a skill gap or an emotional gap.
Mm-hmm.
And that emotional gap is where we go back and say, okay, there's, I actually have evidence to prove that that's not true. I've done this well. I've done that well. So you write those down so you know that next time that shows up, like I've already had this conversation with myself and I know that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it's a skill gap, close it.
Fix it.
Because you've learned all these things. Like, so for me, I never felt like I belonged because I didn't look and act and think like everyone else. But that was an emotional gap because I kept getting promoted. I kept getting put into the most challenging situations. So I had to keep writing those things down to, I used to call it my that a girl file, right? So whenever I felt completely outmatched, because every time I got promoted, I had no idea what I was doing. Like, okay, let's see what we can do here, right? What does this button do? And so, so I would keep my that a girl file for that. But then, like, for example, I am not good at math at all. Like, I don't think letters and numbers should be together. I don't think it's natural.
Except on the check.
That's it, right? I'm thankful for people that do, but that's not my jam. And I'm in financial services. And so whenever we were like in metrics meetings or stats meetings, or, I can run a P&L, but that was kind of the extent of my abilities, then I would like not be the leader I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
I'd pull back. I wouldn't ask the questions because I knew they'd be dumb. And I wasn't able to challenge. And then when I finally realized, okay, this is not serving anyone, then I learned what to do. And I surrounded myself with people who were way smarter at this than I was. So I had quants and I had, data analysts and scientists, and we would pregame before a big meeting so I could ask the dumb questions. And then I could get caught up. And I'm like, all right, I got to put this in, you got to put this in 7th grade math for me so I can understand what we're talking about here. And, so understanding that these are skill gaps, and sometimes you can close them. Sometimes you have to build other strategies. And I just think that helps imposter syndrome when you break it down into a project.
Yeah.
And you do this. And I used to have, and I recommend we all name our inner voice. So I think we've all had someone in our childhood that tortured us tremendously. And so go back to that person, and that's what you name your inner voice. Now, I won't say who mine is, but I think you can immediately go back to, oh, that person was difficult in high school or whatever. And so whenever it does get in front of me, then I'll just be like, okay, I give it a name and I'm like, shut up, so-and-so, we're done.
Yeah.
We're not having this conversation today.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's you. You can go now.
Yes. So the idea is not to eliminate it because that means you're too comfortable, but the idea is to shorten the cycle and not let it put you in that spin cycle where you just can't get out.
And just having a strategy, just having a way of naming it, acknowledging that it's there, writing things down. There's another guest that we had where she did the same thing, got her clients to write it down and ask for each of them, is that true? Is that really true? And of course, for most of the things written down, they're not true.
Right.
And that just helps to eliminate them. And just having a strategy.
Yeah. And I think the funny thing that no one actually realizes is that everyone has it.
Yeah.
Like you see these big execs or these big personalities or whatever, and you're like, oh, they've got it together. I'm like, they're just as terrified as everyone else, right? They've just learned how to move forward with this instead of letting it slow them down and stop them. And so knowing that everyone puts their pants on one leg at a time, and it's a struggle for all of us. I think that also makes it a little bit better to know that this is not unique to us and we're not damaged or, flawed in some way.
Absolutely. And that's exactly why I wanted to ask the question, because I know it will be out there on people's minds. Gosh, I'm conscious of the time and there's so much more that we'd love
I've got a couple ticking in here. One is not sure exactly when this episode is going to go out and when people will be listening to it, but hoping it's going to go out in the next few weeks. It'll be out before the new year. It's a time when people are thinking about the new year ahead. They're thinking about, well, some will call them resolutions, but let's say goals and career focus and where do I go now? The old year is done. The new year lies ahead. What does that look like? What tips or what advice would you give people? What should they be thinking about as they go into a new year? What should they be thinking?
I think it's a great segue for the book as well. So go for it.
Absolutely.
Tammy.
Yes, please.
Right? Thank you. I'm going to give you some advice that you may not have heard before. You may have, I don't know. But I'm a strong believer that because most of our goals are around getting better at things we're not good at. Right? Like, I'm going to stop doing this. I'm going to start doing this or whatever. Right? So I think the reality is if you're not good at something by now, you're not going to be.
Oh,
stop trying.
There in the mirror, face it up.
It's just not going to be, right? And so what I recommend that we do, especially as we're saying about the goals and things, is like, think about what are your strengths? What's your wheelhouse? And spend your time getting better at that. Because if you spend, let's say, 100 hours a year trying to have a goal or build a new skill, if you use that time to strengthen something you're excellent at versus using that time to try and get adequate at something you're not good at, your time is much better spent at playing to your strengths.
Yeah.
So what I love to do for goal setting is, figure out the top 5 things that you crush. And then put that plan together. How are you going to get even better? And then spend the time to figure out, where are my weaknesses that are actually my Achilles heel? Like, they actually slow me down. Most of them are just in our heads, and it'd be nice to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, like the book says you're supposed to do, but it's not going to impact your life really. And so, what are the things that you really think are slowing you down? And then build strategies around how you're going to mitigate that. Right? Who are you going to team with? Are you going to change your direction? Maybe you need to take a different approach. So I love goal setting in terms of playing to your strengths instead of continuing to try and fix the things that we're never going to be great at.
Yeah.
That's my recommendation for goal setting.
Gosh, that's so empowering. It's like, just stop beating yourself up about it.
I had a client and she, she was in between projects. And so she's like, now's the time. I'm going to get up at 5. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to do this. And I'm like, I don't think you're a morning person. Cause I get emails from her like at 1 o'clock at night. She's like, I hate it. I'm like, then why are you doing it?
Why are you doing this to yourself?
the gym at 10 a.m. just as easy as you can go at 5. Like, it doesn't matter. But we think we're put into these situations where we're supposed to do things or we're supposed to think a certain way. And I think just go with what works for you and strengthen things that you've got in your wheelhouse. You'll win every time.
Go with the things that are already in flow rather than constantly exerting energy to push against it.
That's right. Yeah.
So tell us about the book. Who's the book for? What's the title?
Okay. So the book is called Escaping the Career Trap: Transform Your Apathy into Ambition and Never Hate Mondays Again. And so if you get that pit in your stomach on Sunday nights, or if someone you love gets that pit in their stomach on Sunday nights, this book is for you. It is a guide that takes you through. It's a coaching book. So it's meant to, write in it, dog ears, highlights, all that kind of fun stuff, and really takes you through the process of figuring out what it is that lights you up, how to bring this to a market where you're in high demand and in short supply. How to use that to make a big impact for the organization or for your business yourself, and then ultimately how to pay it forward and bring others along with you. And it released in January. It'll be a year old in January, and I'm excited to say it took first place in 3 categories during BookFest.
Amazing.
Just last month. So it was nice to see, and just the emails that I'm getting from the impact and the change in people's lives that this is making. Because I am a rule breaker, and what we talk about in one of the first couple chapters is what are the rules that we believe that are holding us back. And how can we reframe those or play differently, realizing that those rules apply to other people, not you. And because I was never very good at the word no. I'm still not. And so, what are the things that you can start to reframe and act differently that are going to make the biggest difference? And so the book is really for any, anybody who has a career or a business that is just not getting everything that they want out of it. And it walks you through how to do that.
Oh, amazing.
And I'm guessing available at all good booksellers near you online.
Yes, it's on, it's in Amazon, through, it's got audiobook as well. And then we have a special offer through our website, escapingthecareertrap.com, where you get a signed hard copy, tons of free gifts, and lots of love from me. So if you want to level up your experience, you can certainly do that, especially for gift giving season.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I'm thinking Christmas gifts
That's
already.
That's it. Think of all the people that hate Mondays and complain about their jobs. It's a perfect gift.
I was going to say, we can put that link in the show notes as well. So share that with us at the end. As we wrap up, and thank you, Tammy. It's been great having you here. But as we wrap up, any final words for the listeners? Any final nuggets of wisdom out there for them?
Yeah. Anything you wanted to share that you didn't get the chance to say yet?
I think that the last thing I'll leave our listeners with today is, a lot of change is hard, but there's a way to make it easier. And that's through adapting an experimental mindset. See, so many of us, sorry about that, try and avoid failure, right? Because we don't want to fail. We don't want to look bad. We don't want to take a step back. And what we don't realize is that you can't succeed without having failed. And so if you're avoiding failure, you're preventing success. And so the way to be able to get through this and realize, okay, I need to fail forward, I need to fail successfully, I believe is through having that experimental mindset. So instead of saying, this is the decision I'm taking and we're going and taking that hill and no exceptions, take small iterations on the things that you want to change in your career and your life. And use a scientific experimental mentality saying, what does this button do? What happens if I do this? And then, because nothing in our lives is 100% success or 100% failure. It's the narrative that we're able to control. And so when you do this in small iterations and decide, I'm going to keep the things that worked, I'm going to get rid of the things that were painful and try again, and you continue to do that in all aspects of your life, then you can face fear head on. And you're going to make a lot more progress and have a lot more fun doing it. So that is the last nugget of wisdom that I have for today.
Make it iterative. Love that.
Yep. Experimental mindset.
Yeah. I mean, we do it in tech, right? We have agile development in tech in almost all of our companies now, but we don't give ourselves the same grace.
No, indeed. Very, very. I'm still mulling that over. A great note to end on, and a great way to, just start reframing things and positioning ourselves for the new year.
Absolutely.
So, Tammy, thank you so much for your time, for sharing all your wisdom and your passion with us. You're just oozing hope and excitement, love Mondays. changing the career trajectory for so many. So
Thank
really good to have you. Wish you every success with the book. And who knows, look forward to having you again in
Another time,
conversation with us
absolutely.
someday.
so much more to cover, right? And more rabbit holes to go down too. But Andrea,
Excellent.
God, thank you so much. It was a great conversation today. I really enjoyed our time together.
So did we. I think next time we'll come to Mexico, though. We'd rather do it in that weather.
Yeah, come to Mexico City, right? You know, it's beautiful all year round here.
Lovely. All right. Well, for us, we'll say it's a wrap. Thanks to our audience for listening in, and look forward to sharing some more insights with other great guests on the next podcast. But for now, it's goodbye from us.
Bye-bye. Hopefully I'll have my voice back next time.
Indeed. Yeah. All right. And
Bye-bye.
thanks, Tammy.
You're welcome.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, and you want to hear more, the best thing to do is subscribe. Then you'll never miss an episode. There's a new one every Friday. You can stay connected with us on social media at The 4 Habits for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and to participate in discussions related to the show. We always love to hear from you. And of course, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review on your preferred platform to allow us to reach more listeners and help people around the globe radically transform the way they do relationships so they too can enjoy better harmony at home, thrive at work, and win at life.